just like to take you back a little bit to Bereshit, which means Genesis. That was the name of our spacecraft that we put on the moon about 2 years ago. Now, that was a project that took 8 years. It took a long time to plan, a long time to execute, and the problem of raising the money for that project was very, very difficult. And I ran around looking for money for 8 years. And I lost sleep. I really felt it was my responsibility, and I was actually not doing the job. And eventually, my partner said, if you want to sleep, put your hand in your pocket and put in the money yourself. And that's basically what I did. And I financed about half of the project. And I must tell you that actually, in looking back, this is probably the best money that I ever spent. At the time that we did it, our objective was to get to the moon. It was part of a competition which is sponsored by Google and by the X Prize. There were 23 competitors from around the world. And that project was a project for a private company, not a government, a private company to put a spacecraft on the moon. There was a $20 million prize. Well, if I tell you that it cost us $100 million to try and get a $20 million prize, that was the story. But what actually happened was Google got a little bit tired because it took longer and longer and longer, and eventually Google withdrew completely. Now, once we got to the moon, we actually had what I'd call a hard landing. And I had 2 engineers with me when the spacecraft landed. And I told them, if we crash, don't say we crashed, just say we had a hard landing. And sure enough, we had a hard landing, but they said we crashed. And all the excitement and all the anticipation from around the world, people were looking at us. We were on television in the United States. Every television set in Israel was actually tuned in to see what we were doing. And these 2 engineers said, we crashed. And this was a big letdown. I grabbed the microphone and I said, we will launch another project to get to the moon again. And I subsequently went on television and I reinforced my commitment to go to the moon once again and complete the mission. But when I saw that the whole world recognized that we got to the moon, I wondered whether it was really worth a second try. But the truth of the matter is, once I felt that I had that commitment, I felt that we should really complete the project. And what we did was, the project was actually a much more refined project. We're not only going to get a spacecraft to land on the moon, this is a spacecraft that will orbit the moon for about 2 or 3 years. And that will give us a lot of possibility of doing all sorts of things and all sorts of communication. And it will have 2 landers. And these landers would go, and they will land on the moon, on different parts of the moon, and they will actually use some research. This will give us the possibility of keeping young people involved in what we're doing during the whole process.
We had a very exciting and meaningful moment earlier today when we signed a significant MOU between both the Space Agency of Israel and the Emirates. And I would like to say a few words about how meaningful this event is for both nations. The Earth is the cradle of humanity, but mankind cannot stay in the cradle forever. These are the words from over a century ago of rocket science Konstantin Tsiolkovsky. I was very delighted earlier today to sign on behalf of the Israeli government with my counterpart, Her Excellency Sarah El Amiri, the Minister of Advanced Technologies at the Emirates, the first MOU and cooperation agreement between both the Israeli Space Agency and the Emirates Space Agency for several cooperations. Coming just a year after the landmark Abraham Accord peace agreements that were signed between the two countries in Washington, we are making history in Dubai again today. Signing these agreements, which we have with only a few other countries around the world, is the first step in a long journey. This is the bedrock for a future of fruitful cooperation together, in our view. This is a cooperation of peace, but we and the Minister, Amiri, have also a similar vision where we see space, technology, and science not only as tools of a thriving economy, but also an educational tool, a tool to connect between peoples and between countries. The MOUs that were signed earlier today culminates a year of work in which the two teams of the Space Agency learned about each other, worked together in preparations for today's signature. This was the agreement or the understanding between me and the Minister. Because of the COVID-19 limitation, we preferred to make use of the time and the postpone of this signing of the agreements and to come with fruitful and focused projects. During that year, we learned that the two agencies, the Israel Space Agency and the United Arab Emirates one, have a lot in similar in values. They have complementary skill sets, and together we bring synergy to the table. We see this relationship not as a sprint, but as a marathon, and we are off to a great start. Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Jobs once said, "Technology is nothing. What is important is that you have faith in people, that they are basically good and smart, and if you give them the tool, they'll do wonderful things with them." So today, we started a path of doing exactly that, of doing wonderful things with the right tools, and what a better way to enjoy the fruits of peace. Facing limited resources, Israel has always had to rely on its greatest natural resource, the Israeli mind, our human intellect. Our entrepreneurial spirit and vibrant high-technology ecosystem has rightfully earned us the reputation of a startup nation. In Israel, we have made the desert bloom high-tech and became famous for not only being the land of milk and honey, but also a leader in science and technology. Today, I was proud to share that knowledge and technology with our new friends here at the Emirates. The cooperation agreements that were signed this morning address the most up-to-date scope of science and technology. It is not only limited to racing to the moon. Space technology is about climate monitoring, about disaster control, about precise agriculture, about desertification, research, AI, and beyond. It is the betterment of mankind and society at large. Alongside the MOU of the framework, we also signed two LOIs between the two chairpersons of the two agencies, launching two specific projects to work. One has to do with, of course, with the spacecraft Bereshit 2, and I am honored that we are having here Mr. Maurice Khan, who started the vision of having that spacecraft and doesn't stop the attempts to achieve the goal. We were launching, through this LOI, we are launching working teams that will work on trying and finalizing and formalizing an exact program by which this will be progressed by the two countries. This is basically an educational program that will combine students to space and to its benefits all over the world. The second LOI that was signed has to do with the satellite called Venus, which is already operative and it's a cooperation between the State of Israel and France. And the LOI that we signed today with the Emirates includes them and brings them through inclusion to that project so that we will create mutual and cooperative research initiatives. Lastly, I would like to note a third initiative that we are still under work, and that is to create a lunar satellite that will harness coexistent Arab-Israeli children, students and kids, Jewish Israeli students from the Emirates that will together build a satellite and launch it together. Dear friends, the human spirit always rises to great heights. People for centuries have looked to the stars and wondered what lies out there. When God told Abraham he would be the father of many nations, God told him to look at the stars and count them if he could. What a wonderful message we sent today with these agreements to the young people of our nations, the descendants of Abraham. Be curious, be courageous, go out, look to the heavens, count the stars, and try to reach them.